Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about William Shakespeare's early career play, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, which I really just want to inflect the way that Sue Perkins does in the Supersizers Go Elizabethan episode.
What? Is this just names and plays? The Merry Wives of Windsor. All's well then. Two Gentlemen of Verona.
So, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, probably written around 1590, so it's actually possibly Shakespeare's earliest play. It's definitely early days, though. And some of the stuff is not necessarily fantastic, but we get a lot of the hints of the kinds of things Shakespeare will do in his later career when he develops a more sophisticated approach to some of these same techniques. So, The Two Gentlemen of Verona focuses on two best friends, Valentine and Proteus. We open with Valentine going to leave Verona to go to Milan, and Proteus remaining behind because he's in love with Julia and he doesn't want to leave her. Valentine is pretty down on this idea because he's skeptical of the idea of love, or the bonds of love, or whatever it is. So Valentine goes to Milan, Proteus stays in Verona until he's ordered to go to Verona and hang out with Valentine and to serve the Duke, which he does. And so he leaves Julia in Verona. In Milan, Valentine has fallen in love with Sylvia, who's the daughter of the Duke. The Duke wants her to marry this other guy, who she doesn't like. And his name is... give me just a second. Thurio. So Thurio is the Duke's choice for Sylvia. Sylvia doesn't care for Thurio. She loves Valentine. Valentine loves her. And so they develop a plot where they're going to elope. He's going to get a rope ladder up to her room, and then, because her father locks her in so she can't elope, I guess. So they plan to escape. Proteus, by this point, has shown up, and he's seen Sylvia, and Valentine's like, "Oh, Proteus, my best friend in the world. Here's our plan for how I'm going to get Sylvia out of her room, and we're going to go elope." And Proteus, again, Valentine's best friend in the world, is like, Sylvia's pretty sexy. I'm going to go to her dad, the Duke, and be like, "Hey man, Valentine's trying to steal your daughter. You should do something about that." So Proteus betrays his best friend in order to get Sylvia. Now, Sylvia does not like Proteus because he betrayed Valentine, so she's not cool with that. And he abandoned his love for Julia, and Sylvia's not cool with that either. So top marks for Sylvia, Proteus pretty much a dick. The Duke and Thurio then put Proteus in charge of courting Sylvia on Thurio's behalf, which Proteus proceeds not to do. He instead betrays the Duke and Thurio to court Sylvia on his own behalf. So basically, he's betraying everybody. He's betrayed Julia, who he swore fidelity to forever. He's betrayed Valentine, who was his best friend. And he's betrayed the Duke and Thurio to go after Sylvia himself. And Sylvia basically wants him to fuck off and leave her alone, and he refuses to do so. So, while all that's happening, back in Verona, Julia goes to her servant and is like, "Hey, I want to go to Milan and, hang out with my beloved Proteus. How should I do this? Guess I'll dress up as a boy, and I'll fucking go to Milan, and we'll hang out, and everything will be awesome." So she does that. At which point she finds out that Proteus is all up into Sylvia now and doesn't care about her at all. So she does the next natural thing. She enlists as a servant for Proteus. And this is actually a kind of device that we see in the later play Twelfth Night, where we have this developed in a much more sophisticated way. Here it's a little bit clumsy. It's not really explained well why she does these things. But in Twelfth Night, this is a technique that Shakespeare uses again, and he uses it much more effectively. So we've got that element. So Julia is now in the service of Proteus, who's basically like sending her to Sylvia with these letters and love tokens and things like that on his behalf. Like, he's wooing her via the disguised Julia, whose love he's betraying. And again, we see this in Twelfth Night. Sylvia, for her part, is basically like, yeah, I don't actually want anything from Proteus. I don't love him. He committed to Julia, and he should honor that commitment. So, sorry. And then Julia, in disguise, is like, okay, this Sylvia chick's actually cool. I'm not holding her responsible for Proteus being an asshole. While that's happening, Valentine has been exiled from the city, and he gets captured by these bandits out in the woods. And this is very similar to another device Shakespeare later uses, where he's got in As You Like It, he has a character sort of exiled out to the woods, where he's like living in this sort of Robin Hood, merry men type existence. Valentine's in a similar position here. But the weird thing about what happens with Valentine is that he goes out, he gets captured by these bandits, and then they're immediately like, hey man, we know we just captured you and we don't actually know you, but want to be in charge of our group of bandits? And Valentine's like, sure, that sounds fantastic. So he becomes this like bandit leader in the forest. And so toward the end of the play, Sylvia decides she's going to go find Valentine. So she goes out into the forest, gets captured by the bandits. Proteus and Julia, still in disguise as his servant, go out into the forest and get captured by the bandits. And then they all get sort of together brought before Valentine, but they don't get presented to Valentine yet. Like, they get brought into the little, I don't know, like parlor or holding area of his, I don't know, tree house or whatever he's fucking living in. And Valentine's like back in the shadows where they can't see him. And Proteus is like completely ignoring the fact that they've been captured by these bandits in the forest, and he's still hitting on Julia. And at one point, Julia's like, no, I'm never going to be into you. And so Proteus is basically like, well, then I'm going to rape you. At which point, Valentine, to his credit, comes out and is like, hey man, back the fuck up. You were supposed to be my best friend, and you betrayed me to the Duke, you betrayed my love for Sylvia, and now you're trying to rape her? Nah, son, that's not okay. At which point, Proteus is like, oh, Valentine, my best friend, I've been feeling really bad about how I fucked you over and tried to steal your girl and everything, so I'm sorry. And Valentine's like, well, you apologized, so I guess no harm, no foul. And just to show that this is a genuine acceptance of your probably bullshit apology, I'm gonna give you Sylvia. Like, that is literally what he says. He's like... So Proteus says, my shame and guilt confounds me. Forgive me, Valentine. If hearty sorrow be a sufficient ransom for offence, I tender it here. I do as truly suffer as e'er I did commit. So that's his apology. And Valentine says, "Then I am paid, and once again I do receive thee honest. Who by repentance is not satisfied is nor of heaven nor earth. For these are pleased, by penitence the eternal wrath's appeased. And that my love may appear plain and free, all that was mine in Sylvia I give thee." So, without consulting Sylvia about it, because she still does not like Proteus, Valentine's like, "Yeah, I love this chick, but you can have her because you apologized for fucking over everybody." So that's a problem. But then Julia, still in disguise, faints, at which point it's revealed that she's Julia. And Proteus is basically like, "Oh, Julia, you're pretty sexy, so I'm gonna go back to you. And Sylvia, whatever, you can have Valentine." Again, no real question to the women about whether that's necessarily what they want. Julia does affirm that that's what she wants, but no real question of what Sylvia wants. Then the bandits bring in the Duke and Thurio, who have also gone out into the woods and been captured by the bandits. Because these are just, I guess, the best bandits in the world. Like, they catch everybody. So the Duke and Thurio come in, and Thurio's like, "Ah, Sylvia, my chick." And Valentine's like, "Hey man, I'm the king of these bandits. If you try and claim Sylvia, I will stab you in the face." And Thurio's like, "Well, that's me done. I'm not that interested in Sylvia, so best of luck to you all. Good health, long life." At which point the Duke is like, "Man, you are a fucking coward. So you can't marry Sylvia. Valentine, you're my backup plan. You now get to marry Sylvia." So everybody ends up with who they wanted to end up with, except Thurio, who is just like, "Whatever, I don't care that much." And possibly Sylvia is not that pleased about the fact that she basically just got handed off to three people. Like, Valentine was going to hand her off to Proteus. Proteus was going to hand her off to Valentine. Her dad handed her off to Valentine. So even though she wants to marry Valentine, like, she's pretty much just getting fucking passed around like a sack of flour or some shit. So it's not a good ending from a feminist perspective. Like, this is clearly some troublesome stuff going on here. And the fact that Proteus fucking betrays everybody, he's such a scumbag. Like, he betrays everybody throughout the entire play, and then at the end they're just like, "Well, he said he's sorry, so I guess he has to have a happy ending." No, like, it's an incredibly unsatisfying ending, in my opinion. Some of that is a sort of post-feminist reading where the idea that you can just fuck over a bunch of women and it's fine is problematic, but it is what it is. It's early Shakespeare, early days. Things get slightly better, though we still have some of these same issues in later plays. But the other thing that really strikes me about Two Gentlemen of Verona is there's a really great use of this technique called stichomythia, which is a sort of rapid-fire dialogue that you usually see in comedies, but you sometimes see in other genres as well. So if you think about, for instance, the Who's on First sketch by Abbott and Costello, this is stichomythia. It's a really, really rapid back and forth, and the comedy comes partly from the speed at which it's delivered and partly from the sort of cleverness of the wordplay and the language, etc., etc. And so Sylvia actually points this out very interestingly, because in Act 2, Scene 4, she uses this phrase, "a fine volley of words, gentlemen, and quickly shot off." So there's this sort of recognition that this is a technique that Shakespeare is using, and he loves wordplay throughout his entire oeuvre. He uses language, linguistic play, etc., etc. And we can see this actually shortly before that in Act 2, Scene 1. We actually get it in a number of other places, but I think this is a nice self-contained example where Valentine is talking to his servant Speed. And Speed actually gets involved in a lot of the wordplay, often with Proteus's servant Lance, he's probably like a psychopath or something, because every conversation he has is basically just him playing with words, often to Speed's dismay. But here Speed and Valentine are talking about Sylvia. And so Speed says that she is not fair as of you. That she is not so fair as of you well favored. Valentine says, I mean that her beauty is exquisite, but her favor infinite. Speed says, that's because the one is painted and the other out of all count. Valentine says, how painted and how out of count? I'm not doing this very quickly. It really needs to be quick to get the full effect, but hopefully you're getting a little sense of this. Valentine, how painted and how out of count? Speed, marry, sir, so painted to make her fair that no man counts of her beauty. Valentine, how esteem'st thou me? I count of her beauty. Speed, you never saw her since she was deformed. Valentine, how long hath she been deformed? Speed, ever since you loved her. Valentine, I've loved her ever since I saw her, and still I see her beautiful. Speed, if you love her, you cannot see her. Valentine, why? Speed, because love is blind. Oh, that you had mine eyes, or your own eyes had the lights they were wont to have when you chid Sir Proteus for going unguarded. Valentine, what should I see then? Speed, your own present folly and her passing deformity. For he being in love could not see to garter his hose, and you being in love cannot see to put on your hose. Valentine, belike, boy, then you were in love, for last morning you could not see to wipe my shoes. Speed, true, sir, I was in love with my bed. I thank you swinged me for my love, which makes me the bolder to chid you for yours. So, again, we've got this very quick back and forth of this sort of word play and this sort of joyous engagement with language and sort of challenging different meanings of words like form, like painted, like appearance, like love, and so on and so on. And so that occurs throughout the play, where we have these very fast, funny exchanges of dialogue. And it's a great technique for comedy because it works really well. And even though this is a very early work by Shakespeare, he does it quite exceptionally in this play.